I'm back, and in this tutorial I'm going to be going over a really simple way to upload files from my computer to the server. Now the server is still on my computer, and it kind of seems worthless considering how I can take my test file here and move it into server. All I gotta do is click and drag. But we're gonna pretend like I can't do that whatsoever, that this server is a GoDaddy server, a HostGator server, it's a Google server, and I have this really important file here on my desktop that needs to be on that server. So we're just gonna pretend. So here we are, and I already have the server running right here, and I already have the FTP client ready to rock. So first thing you're gonna need is you're gonna need some sort of test file. I just have a test.rtf, which is in Mac just a simple .txt file, just a different format. Whenever you click it up, it says test. Don't need that. So first things first, what do we need? We need to give my user Todd here on my server permissions. I've simply just set the permissions to it's PERM equals, and in double quotations, ELRADFMW. Alright, you may ask where I got these permissions, because if you're actually going to try and implement your own server to use, you need to know where to find some of this stuff. Remember, I used the FTP lib, FTPD lib. Don't need the Python shell that we see right here. So everything for all the information we need to know about this library and using it, it's going to be right here, which you can just Google search it. Go to documentation and read permissions. So let's take a look at what permissions I have set up for this user. He can change directory, he can list files, he can retrieve, he can append data to an existing file, he can delete a file or directory, rename file or directory, create new directory, store. User Todd here has all the permissions that we need. But but some of these permissions you don't want everybody to have. So whenever you go create permissions, make sure you know right there. So we have all the permissions we need. If we didn't have the permissions, it would say access denied, and I'll show you that after we finish up the code. So I'm going to go ahead and uncomment this line. We are already familiar with this line right here. We're going to need to import OS into it, and it's os.chdr, which is OS change directory. We're already familiar with it from our HTTP server right here. Simply all it does is it tells it to look in this directory. So we're going to switch the directory here. Now we're going to start doing some very basic file handling. So we're going to have a variable, mine's called f, and it's going to open this file with RB. RB is just permissions. If you look up Google file management in Python and stuff like that, you can find out what all the permissions mean. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to ftp.store binary. It's going to store test RTF, which is going to print that out for us. And f, the variable f, so we're going to tell it to look here. And that's what's going to actually upload it, or basically store it to our server. And just for good measure, to make sure everything ran properly, we have ftp.retrlines, which simply is, and it takes the argument of list, which is just going to simply list all the files in the directory. Alright, so let's run this code. Here's our server. Make sure I save this real quick before I run it, because I'm going to feel stupid if I don't. Alright, and here we are. First, we're going to look at the client side, so we're going to forget about this for a second. So here I ran my command. This is where I started the FTP client. If we notice, it has all of the original files. And if you notice down here, it added our test RTF. To double check, we're going to open up server, test RTF, and it just simply copied it and moved it into there. Now taking a look on the server side, see where it showed that I logged in. Start from there. Alright, here we go. So I connected, logged in is successful, data connections open, transfer complete of type 1 binary file. Tells you right here that I stored test RTF onto the server. Tells me that the transfer is complete. Right here it says store, gives me the directory test RTF completed and the amount of time that it took to do it. So that's a really basic way of how to upload a file to a server via FTP. Now what I need to show you here is, what if we didn't have these permissions? I'm going to copy this so that way I don't have to retype it in. Control Command C, exit, Command S. Alright. Don't be complicated. So open up a new window here. Start up our FTP server now without user Todd having permissions. And to make sure we don't have any conflicts, move that to trash because we're not going to need that. And the file should still be on the desktop. Let's run this. If you notice down here, you get at the very bottom a 505 error, which means not enough privileges. And this also gave you some errors. It even tells you on the client side, not enough privileges. If you notice, the file is, we do not have test RTF on the server. So let's add that back in there. Now let's run the server as anonymous, and we should get the same thing because anonymous does not have those privileges. Once again, not enough privileges, and we took our arguments out of the parameters. Not enough privileges once again. Now we could probably give it those parameters. We could give it permission parameters, but the point of having users is so that way, one, logging what a user does, and we'll get into that shortly, and number two is make sure people don't have permissions to do certain things, such as delete files or upload files that we don't want them to. So it's basically taking the FTP client and just uploading files to it. See you in the next tutorial.